For her birthday, I took my girl, Katie, to Arizona so we could stay with some friends of hers and spend a few weeks partying and getting crazy and stuff before heading back to school for the year. We drove up in my dad's car, and it's a really old Ford make. It's pretty beat up too. The road there was bumpy and long, and our relationship seemed at its strongest on the road. We were really in love, and that was the first time I realized that. I'd never been truly in love before. But we were about halfway there when we realized we were going to run out of gas long before the nearest petrol pump. Katie's head was out of the window, sunglasses on in the blistering heat outside. Nothing but the wild desert landscape to be seen in all directions. We became frantic. We hadn't seen another car on the road in almost an hour. What if we broke down here in the middle of the desert, with no food or water, with no one out here to find us? I sped up slightly, being driven forth by these fears. It was around then that we came across a gas station, smack bang in the middle of nowhere. Dry, empty nowhere. It was an old worn down servo, long yellow grass blew in the breeze beneath it. Outside were two rustled gas pumps. At first, we didn't know if it was occupied. It seemed so lifeless. But as we pulled up and saw the petrol stains in the dirt, we were convinced otherwise. Katie started refilling the car, and I went inside to pay and grab something to eat on the road. When I first went to open the door, it jammed. This perturbed me. So I looked at the sign to check and was reassured that the store was open, according to the torn sign that hung in between the dull yellow curtains at the door window. I pushed harder and harder with effort and got into the shop. Inside, it was totally abandoned and left to ruin. Complete aisles lay on the ground. The fridges were smashed and the glass coated the floor. Despite the brightness outside, the interior of the gas station was dark and bitterly cold. Then there came, from behind me, this quiet weeping, like a child's, and I felt my heart race. It was coming from the back room. I stepped over the smashed glass and twisted metal remnants on the floor, over where the patches of grass had grown through. I ran my hand along the wall and felt the crisscross of ivy beneath my fingers. It was definitely overgrown. Then there came the crying again, and now I was facing the back room door, and it was directly in front of me. I pushed the door open and it creaked with its rust and joints. Inside there lay several wooden steps into the basement. It was pitch black, and the smell coming from there was utterly horrific. The drip-drop of water alerted me to the fact that the basement was flooded. The water was up to my knees. Again, there came the crying, and a very small splash in the far corner of the basement. "Hello?" I called out. "Is anyone there?" I started approaching the corner. The smell was horrible, and the cold water eventually got to me. The sobbing was getting louder and stronger. In the corner, I swore I saw something move against the shadows. "Hello?" I called again. "Is something wrong?" I finally reached the corner. Still dark. I had to bend down to avoid pipes, which leaked down my back and trickled all the way down my spine. The figure in front of me was very small and black, hunched over, sobbing quietly with its head in its hands. "What are you doing down here?" I whispered. Then it stopped moving completely. It was totally still, and all noise seemed to cease but for the quiet dripping of a broken pipe somewhere behind me. and I outstretched my arm to touch its tiny shoulder. But it then began to slowly turn in my direction and looked me right in the eye. And as its face swiveled around to look at mine, I remember screaming, swinging my head up in recoil, cracking it on the pipes above. The face was white as a sheet, pale like a hideous, moving mask that was breathing and convulsing. The eyes and mouth were completely black holes, huge and widening even as I looked into them. They were so huge they almost consumed its entire face. As desperately as I tried to escape, it splashed towards me at rapid speed, uncurling its long, thin fingers, and it was wailing now, staring into me with its huge black eyes. And as I scrambled up the stairs with great difficulty, as I felt my legs begin to give way beneath me, it sprinted out of the water and up the stairs towards me. I slammed the door, flipped the lock, and tore out of the store into the old Ford. Kate began laughing when she saw me, jeans wet, trembling with sweat soaking my chest, but I grabbed her and I screamed for her to drive. For about a half an hour, I could barely tell her what happened in the store. She listened and gave me a sheer look of terror and horror. I finally gave in and told her everything. She pulled the car to the side of the road and began to cry herself. I asked her what was wrong. She said, "I saw something while you were gone. When you went in the store, I was just putting the pump back when I saw this little girl and a man, her father, I guess. The father stared at me with blank eyes and a hanging jaw. But the girl, oh God, the girl, she was staring straight at me, grinning with this huge smile that stretched so far across her face. I couldn't see any hair on her, and her skin was so dark. Not dark like a colored girl, but black like a shadow. And her smile just shone through the window. I convinced myself it was a trick of the eye and looked away. When I looked back, they were gone. Then a little while later, you came back out. It was dusk by now. We had nowhere to stay. We had not traveled nearly as much as we'd hoped to that day, and the nearest motel meant going back past the gas station. So we just drove up roadside, where we were, and into the clearing a little way up, where people camped sometimes. We'd obviously came after the night of a big party. There was broken glass everywhere. When we arrived, however, it was empty. Completely empty. After a while, I tried to reassure her that we were okay now. I calmed her down, put my arms around her, and we started to kiss. I moved to get closer to her, and she suddenly screamed like hell itself. "It's her! It's her!" she screeched in my ear, fumbling to start up the engine. I turned in time to witness a small black face, grinning literally ear to ear with only darkness inside. It was crawling into the car through my open window with its limbs splayed out like an insect. It had too many limbs. Way too many long arms, the fingers feeling my face like antennae. And we sped off, back down the road, far away from whatever the hell that was. Back on the road, nothing seemed right. There were no stars. That was what I noticed first. I was too shaken to think too much of it, but there were no clouds that could be blotting them out. It was just a vast night sky, devoid of all light. A few minutes later, we had been driving forward, still sweating and breathing heavy. We passed the gas station. My heart skipped a beat. The gas station was at least 2 hours away, in the opposite direction. All the lights were on, and I saw the door slowly sliding open. As we shot past it, Kate was in such hysterics she found it hard to keep driving. We stopped the car in the middle of the desolate road. I decided we would switch seats so that I could drive. She shuffled across from her seat to mine, and I opened the door to get out. As soon as I was outside, the foul stench of the basement overwhelmed me. I gagged and then vomited down the side of the car. It was then I noticed the runner. A pale white thing sprinting towards us through the fog, its limbs practically a blur. I could make out no face. How long had it been following us? Running after us in the night? I got into the driver's seat as quickly as possible. We drove off again, not talking. Kate whimpered and I silently prayed. Then we got past the gas station again. The door was open now. There were 2 figures standing at the door, waiting for us. As we forced ourselves on, we both became aware of a soft, barely audible weeping in the back seats. But neither of us dared to turn around. "Ignore it," I whispered. Trembling hands gripped the steering wheel. Katie was curled in the fetal position, holding her head in her hands. The wailing increased, becoming extremely loud, ear-piercing, and horrific. I finally ordered myself to end it and look behind me. And when I did, for a split second I thought it was the girl, in a white dress looking back up at me. But she was gone as soon as she'd appeared. And I made sure to check the seats very carefully. Yet there was nothing. In my tiredness and fear, I had completely lost track of the road. I drove on, and all through the night, Katie whimpered. I touched her once, but she screamed, and I never tried again after that. The noises from the back seat started up again. We passed the gas station 2 more times that night. The people at the door were getting closer and clearer to us every single time. And the finest slither of red light had begun to settle on the horizon. It was still dark as hell, but at least I was able to see the road ahead of me now. Katie had been silent, face concealed under her hands for some time. I decided to check the time, so I turned on the radio. At first there was only static. Instead of time or anything at all, the digital clock simply appeared black. I fiddled with the dial, trying to change the station, and between static I only found one audible channel. It had a high-pitched buzz in the background. The man was muttering names under his breath. 29, Lucy, 30, Adam, 31, Katie. When I heard that, I switched back to static. I knew which name was next. When we got to Katie's friend's house, it was morning. It was overcast and everywhere the smell of rain on it. Her friends weren't home. Katie's friends lived way out in the country, with no one else around, in a mile. The grass was climbing the walls outside. How long have they been out? As soon as we were inside, Katie started whimpering again. I realized she had been silent. She was biting on her lip. Blood was trickling down her chin and the skin around her mouth and was torn and chewed through. She grabbed the newspaper and some masking tape off the table and began blocking out the windows. After the night's events, I don't know whether I would be insane to join her or stop her. I simply watched. She covered the windows, jammed the door, and turned the lights off. For some time, could have been minutes or hours, we sit silent in the dark. I offered to turn the television on. Katie said nothing, sitting blank and comatose. I turned the television on anyway. A grainy black and white image flickered to life before us. A white face with empty eyes and an impossibly huge, ear-to-ear smile flashed up, and the smile grew wider and wider the longer we stared into it. And there came the sound of weeping. From the television or in the house, I don't know anymore, but I shut off the TV. It's been 3 whole days now, and I haven't seen Katie all day. She spends all her time in the closet, crying. I once tore the door open and screamed at her. She screamed back. Her face contorted into something grotesque, inhuman. I slammed it in her face. The phone rings. Often. A voice, my mother's, I believe, but I don't know anymore, whispering under its breath. I can only catch snippets of what it says. Come back. You're always welcome to come back. Come back. Sometimes in the background I hear quiet chuckling. I hang up without saying a thing, usually. The bathroom is shining white. I hear the shower running. I'll walk in to find nothing. Nothing at all. And then, when I'm in the bathroom, I will hear the television flick back on. It always goes to the face. In the background there are muttering voices now. I've called the police twice. All I get is the whispering woman's voice. I called Katie's friends too. Just as fruitlessly. There are knocks at the door a lot now. Through the newspaper, on the other side of the window, I see their hands slam against the glass and slide down. They do this for hours on end sometimes. They press their eyes up against the glass, through the holes in the newspaper. And at night, we hear screaming from the guest room. I boarded it up. Sometimes I find tiny pieces of glass on the ground. A leak sprung up about 2 days ago in my room downstairs. Black spots of mold have appeared on the walls. There's a smell throughout the house, seeping from my room. I know this can only be the odor of decay. I pray. I pray hopelessly, and I wish, and I swear to God I wish that I had never gotten out of that